Football's world governing body, FIFA, has admitted bribery allegations directed to two of its members in the latest blow to its reputation. Is it time for FIFA to face itself and ask difficult questions about the probity of some of its members, past and present? And should it review its voting process? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hud Abdelhamid. An undercover reporter from the British Sunday Times posed as a lobbyist for the United States bid. He met with Amos Adamo, the president of the West African Football Union, who appeared to offer his vote in return for $800,000 to build football pitches in Nigeria. The paper also alleges Renal Temari, a FIFA vice president, asked for a payment to finance a sports academy. FIFA's president Sepp Blatters has admitted that damage to FIFA's name and reputation has been significant. Rory Challens has the story.
A big headline story for a British newspaper, a big headache for world football's governing body. According to the Sunday Times, two FIFA officials offered to sell their votes to countries wanting to host upcoming World Cups. Posing as American lobbyists, two reporters spoke to the Nigerian FIFA Executive Committee member Amos Adamu. In the footage, he appears to agree to support the US 2018 World Cup bid in exchange for money to build football pitches in Nigeria.
2018, but are they going for the two?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh.
So it would be 2018 that you would be able to help us with.
Also under suspicion, President of the Oceania Football Confederation, Renal Temari, alleged to have asked for money for a sports academy. Temari and Adamu are two of 24 FIFA officials who'll decide in December who gets to host the 2018 competition. A very unpleasant situation is how FIFA President Sepp Blatters described it in an open letter to his executive committee. He admits it's had a very negative impact on the body and that an in-depth investigation would be launched. But in an anonymous interview with Al Jazeera, one of the reporters said there's more to come.
We have quite a lot of other material, which some of which we'll be publishing next week. A lot of people did tell us about offers that had been made for huge amounts of money, such as $1 million US dollars for votes.
It's not the first allegation of official corruption in international football. The English FA's chief and chairman of the country's 2018 bid, seen next to David Beckham here, had to resign in May. He claimed Russia and Spain would bribe referees at last summer's World Cup in South Africa. As FIFA's investigation gets underway, Sepp Blatters is urging his committee members to stay quiet. It's damage limitation time at the top of world football. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
Well, joining us now to discuss this issue are our guests. In London, Andrew Warshaw, chief reporter for Inside World Football. That's an online publication looking at the business side of the game. In Johannesburg, Ashraf Garda, a radio host and sports journalist. And in Cairo, Osama Khalil, former captain of the Egyptian national football team and the country's first ever professional footballer. Welcome, gentlemen. Andrew Warshaw, let me just start with you. Is this latest scandal come anyway as a surprise to anyone?
I don't think it has. I mean, behind the scenes, everyone's known for some time that things were going on. In a way, it was an accident waiting to happen. There have been hints and innuendos virtually from the start of this bid process. But of course, nothing quite like this has happened. And when it's made public, it really does bring home to everybody, not just those involved in football, just how serious and damaging such allegations can be.
Well, Osama Khalil, I mean, you're a former professional football player. When you hear such allegations, do they actually have an impact on the players?
I believe so. I think this is one of the problems the soccer globally, as we can witness right now, have a big problem inside the field. If we think about it, we have three major things happened during this week. Rights and distractions at the game between Italy and Serbia. And then you move to Africa, where you have another game yesterday between Ahli and El Taraqi, and a big blow up with the referee decision. And it's very similar to what happened between France and North Ireland right before the World Cup. Then we move to this scandal and what happened 2 or 3 days with the officials from the FIFA. So all of these major things absolutely affecting the soccer game and affecting the players and the entire business.
Well, Ashraf Garda, your country actually hosted this latest World Cup, so you actually felt the full impact of the FIFA rule of law, let's say, in South Africa for at least a month. What impact did it actually have? Did you feel this sort of obscure world of FIFA?
Yeah, we certainly do. I mean, I do lots of radio and TV things, and one of the things I said on my radio marketing show at the time of the World Cup, that for 1 month, the president of South Africa was President Blatters, and I don't think I'm too off the mark in that statement, because FIFA had a 17-point rule that South Africa had to adhere to as one of the rules to actually getting the World Cup in the first place. And of course, South Africa, as so many other countries, so desperate to host the World Cup, of course, agreed to many of those things, or well, just about every one of them, of course. And amongst the more significant ones, the serious tax breaks that FIFA were allowed, something like maybe 3.4 billion rands in taxes that were not paid to South Africa, that were FIFA were allowed to take out of the country. The other, of course, all the FIFA partners in terms of sponsors were given very similar tax breaks. And the third thing, of course, the renaming of stadiums. You couldn't have your traditional branding. And then, general advertising around South African stadiums and even outside. There was a severe clampdown. I mean, the story goes that the issue around ambush marketing around the 2010 World Cup was the most severe ever. That means it was the most protected ever. And I don't think South Africa, the government, had any choice in the matter, meaning that once again, in their chase to ensure that the president, in this case FIFA, was satisfied, as many other countries would do, they essentially sold over their rights in terms of running a country for an entire month.
Well, Andrew Warshaw, I mean, Ashraf Garda just said the problem. One of the issues here is that every country wants to host the World Cup. Is that the main factor that actually gives FIFA and its 4 executive members so much power?
Yeah, in a way, yes. I mean, the problem is, Ash is right. So a lot of countries do want to host the World Cup. The difficulty is there aren't really that many anymore who have the capability, both in terms of infrastructure, in terms of commercial value, and in terms of the whole history, the pedigree of football, who can actually host it. So we are coming down to a finite few who, and it's a group that's getting actually smaller and smaller and not bigger and bigger. So it puts huge pressure on voting members of the FIFA Executive Committee to actually decide where they want to cast their votes. But there's one thing that's happened in this particular World Cup, and it's very important to emphasise. This is the first time that FIFA have announced that they're going to decide on hosting of 2 World Cups at the same time, 2018 and 2022. Now, we've never been told precisely, exactly, what the reason for that is, though the general feeling is that it's for commercial stability, so that the commercial partners and TV rights can be put in place early. But what it actually has done is open a can of worms and encouraged even more the possibility of deal-making. 2 World Cups, more deal-making. It's not rocket science. It's pretty obvious that could happen.
So, Osama Khalil, are we in a situation where actually, let's take these 2 World Cups, two World Cups in one deal, more money for FIFA, more power for FIFA?
Yes, you are absolutely right. And the game is getting bigger in terms of very commercialized. And on the other hand, you have media coverage, which can put a lot of money for the FIFA itself and the rest of the teams joining the World Cup. But bear in mind, there is a code of ethics which requires all the officials with their commitment to the FIFA and the leagues and the clubs all over the world. They have to respect and to respect. This is a lot of we'll put a lot of emphasis on this word, their commitment, and without any misunderstanding, or on the other hand, at least they have to represent their cause with honesty and dignity. So if we forgot all about this, we have a problem, because the game is getting bigger and getting very commercialized, and there is a lot of money inside this business. So I am not going to go with the idea the game is getting bigger, but on the other hand, I have officials at the FIFA, they got everything for themselves. In another word, for the good of the game and whatever in it for me. This is exactly the concept some of these officials are working towards. It's for the good of the game. But whatever in it, in this game, it's for me. That's exactly what happened with Mr. Amado and the other guy from Tahiti.
Well, talking about the code of ethics, let's just take a quick look at the bidding process. Bidding countries must first agree to FIFA's hosting agreement. An inspection follows. It assesses facilities, infrastructure, and security capabilities as just some of the criteria that have to be met. Once approved, a voting process begins. FIFA claims the selection process is one that prides itself on transparency. All members and bidding committees are therefore bound by a strict code of ethics. It states that they shall conduct any activities in relation to the bidding in accordance with basic ethical laws such as integrity, responsibility, trustworthiness, and fairness. According to FIFA's code of conduct, this means that bidding nations cannot offer monetary gifts or any kind of promise or benefit in connection with the bidding process. The member association should not make any written or oral statements about any of the bidding nations, and they must not collaborate with any other bidding nation in an attempt to influence the outcome of the vote. So, Ashraf Garda, can the process actually continue as it is, given that actually from these latest allegations and other scandals lately, no one is actually following these codes?
You're spot on. My sense is that the code, the system of actually getting a country to win the World Cup appears to be hopelessly flawed. Even when South Africa lost the right to host the 2006 World Cup, when Charles Dempsey then, abstained, we knew, there's public knowledge in the last few days before the bid, that Brazil, who were going against South Africa, decided to opt out on the basis that South Africa would vote for Brazil for the 2010 World Cup at this stage. So what I'm saying, even at governmental level, this horse trading appears to be the norm. So we shouldn't be surprised about it. And the point therefore made earlier by the early guest for the double World Cup now, where 2 World Cups will be announced simultaneously, does allow for this, we'll give you this, you give us that. I'm just wondering, Sepp Blatters made the point so often with regard to games on the field of play that, we can't tamper with the human emotions, and we need to leave that to the referees, and we allow for mistakes. I'm just wondering whether that is also not translating in terms of the decisions made by these 24 men, because ultimately 24 people, or 12 or 13, hold sway over the entire world in terms of determining which country gets in the spotlight every 4 years. And that is an enormous responsibility. And as you know, and I know, we can't necessarily vouch for everyone in terms of their own credibility. And that's the reality of the world anyway.
Well, Andrew Walsh, you're talking about these 24 men. I mean, some of them had accusations, allegations of corruption, and nothing really ever happened to them. Do we know exactly what happens within this executive committee? How do they work? How do they deal? How do they take decisions?
Well, they have executive committee meetings every few months. They have an agenda to start with. They go through that agenda, and then there's any other business at the end of it, much like most meetings in any business. The difficulty is, we've mentioned, transparency, we've mentioned credibility. These particular positions within the FIFA Executive Committee are incredibly important, and it's going to be fascinating in the next 24, 48 hours to see exactly what FIFA does to preserve its credibility. And it's got to do something. This particular issue cannot be swept under the carpet. But there's another issue at stake. Remember, Africa has 4 representatives within the FIFA Exco. Now, these 4, of course, include Mr. Adamu, and Africa is the only country that obviously doesn't have a bidder. So there are 4 votes that are being courted very, very heavily throughout the process by all 9 bidding countries. It's going to be fascinating to see if FIFA takes any action against Mr. Adamu and his colleague from Tahiti. Obviously, that's from a different continent. But nevertheless, what's going to happen if 24 is suddenly reduced to 22 and we've got the vote for these World Cups in what? Between 6 and 7 weeks. Can we just say that 22 people are going to take the vote instead of 24? There's going to be, I dread to think what must be happening right now in the corridors of power at FIFA, because something has got to happen. This thing cannot just, as I say, be swept under the carpet, but the repercussions of it are immense.
Okay, Osama Khalil, I mean, from what Andrew Warshaw just described, FIFA has become this sort of multinational economical business and political body that makes dealings and behind the scenes. Do you think that FIFA has now become out of touch with the game, actually, with what happens on the pitch?
Absolutely right. The more they get bigger, the more they have the upper hand, and on the other hand, there is no any other authorities can judge them, or at least can ask them, what are you doing? So they are, in terms of membership, they are like 208 members. They are bigger than the United Nations. So you have a lot of contradicting things here, because the slogan for the FIFA, fair play. But what happened officially inside and during these issues, you have officials, they do not respect this commitment. And getting back to Mr. Andrew was saying about Africa, let me remind you something. You know, there is a guy was working as a member of this committee, the executive committee, from Botswana. And they find out he was selling tickets for the World Cup 2006, 12 tickets. And they forced him. He was selling the tickets at the black market. And they forced him to resign. So the problem here, working with the characters, if you do have 4 members from the 24 for the executive committee, and 4 of them, you really have to think 100 million times who is going to represent Africa and what these characters, because in 2 or 3 years we have 2 cases. We have Mr. Ismail from Botswana, and he forced to resign, and today we have Mr. Amado from Nigeria, and we have a problem with his issue. So we have to study the 2 cases very well, and we have to think, are the FIFA going along with their banner when they say fair play and respect the soccer business and all of these kind of things? There is a contradiction here, and we have to think about it. Otherwise, it's going to be a chaos at the soccer business. And as I said it in the beginning, in this week, we have 3 major things happen. In Europe, you have this problem at the game between Italy and Serbia, and there is a lot of political issues was running toward this game. And in Africa, you have a game yesterday, and the referee was involved in it with a very bad situation. And today, with the Sunday Times report and what happened for these 2 guys, officially we have a problem with all of this 3 evidence, and we have to think if this is what's FIFA all about, or there is something wrong. If we face the issue strongly, we are going to face the game. But I don't agree with Mr. Ashraf in the beginning when he said this is life. I don't think this is life, because as a soccer player, I play to teach the young players principles and to teach them how to make commitment to anything they wanted to do, either in their sport or in their own life, or when they go to college or whatever. But when I put a slogan or a banner and I don't go along with it, then I have a problem. So
Ashraf,
we have to
let me just bring Ashraf Garda into this conversation. When FIFA was in South Africa, it was very unpopular. We heard many complaints about really across the board in South Africa. And today I was looking at the website of the England bid, and one of the first things that were written there is that England promises FIFA $240 million in profits. It struck me as that one of the most important things in organizing a bid now is to make sure that FIFA gets the money it wants.
Absolutely. I mean, so to go back to respond very quickly to the panelists from Egypt, when I say this is life, it's certainly not a sense of agreeing with this is the way life is. I'm saying that appears to be the reality, and the reality is a rotten reality. It's very sad that one speaks about that. I think, you know, the point you're making about England sort of upping up their profits, I mean, isn't that the case with just about every country bidding for the World Cup? The nature of the bidding process suggests that every country needs to sort of doll up its country, so when these delegates come to the country, they look as pretty as ever, so that they will say nice things about them, and therefore will possibly and hopefully vote for them. And it appears to be that the delegates from the so-called underdeveloped or developing nations then may well trade off either for themselves, which is obviously illegal, but also may well trade off for their country's benefits, which can also be seen as corrupt, on the basis of I'm trying to help my country, which may be seen as a good thing for the people in the country. What it does suggest, however, clearly this inducement appears to be the norm. It's not the right thing. It therefore needs a major call for reform. I know Andrew Jennings may have a lot to say about his book, Foul, and we may laugh off many of the accusations. He may be sort of sitting with a snide smile to say, well, I told you guys about so many things, but that's at the bottom. There's a lot more at the top.
And my last question is for you, Andrew Warshaw. Now, the last time such a scandal happened, or this scandal, let's say, is compared to the Salt Lake City scandal that actually pushed the Olympic Committee to change its rules. Now, FIFA is supposed to go ahead with a vote at the beginning of December. Do you think it can go ahead under these circumstances, or should it change its rules, and does it have time to change its rules?
I don't think it does have time to change its rules. The only way it should change its rules, of course it should, because we must have stricter criteria and stricter guidelines now. But I don't, if they stick to December the 2nd for the vote, I don't think they'll have time to change the rules. That's going to be the problem. But thereafter, they certainly have to. But let me tell you one thing, finally. My colleague in Cairo said a moment ago, he pointed out quite rightly about Ismail Bamji of Botswana, who left the executive committee after the scandal of allegedly, well, it wasn't allegedly because he admitted it, selling on tickets in the 2006 World Cup. I would suggest that two members of the FIFA Exco who have allegedly said they would accept cash for votes is a far more serious and significant issue than selling on a batch of tickets at the World Cup. So, as I keep saying, this is not going to go away. If FIFA do nothing about this, their reputation is going to be tarnished, and tarnished for a long time. Eventually, they will have to change the rules. If they do it before December the 2nd, it's going to be very difficult to find a way of doing it unless they push the vote back into the new year. And then, of course, that opens a whole different scenario in terms of lobbying and in terms of actually finding a date for doing this thing.
Well, I'm sure FIFA will be under the spotlight for the weeks to come, but we have reached the end of our show, so I'd like to thank our guests in London, Andrew Warshaw, in Johannesburg, Ashraf Garda, and in Cairo, Osama Khalil. And thank you so much for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments and suggestions. Please email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From the whole team, it's goodbye for now.